Today's story comes to us from Melissa, who describes how Jesus spoke with her after the death of her cousin, who is now her spirit guide. Let's get into it. Melissa writes, "Hello. Let me start by saying how much I enjoy your channel and how it has helped me find comfort in knowing that this life is not an end for us if we have faith and belief in God. I wanted to share my recent experience with you. It isn't an NDE as it doesn't involve me passing away, but rather being touched several times by Jesus himself. I will start from the beginning. I lost my cousin at the end of August of this year. She was only 29 years old. She was tiny yet fierce, a true survivor of all that life dealt to her because she was slightly different than everyone else in our family. There was even a time when her parents were told that she may have a form of dwarfism, yet she rose above that. She was still only 4'9" and at her heaviest, weighed around 79 pounds. She had a generous and kind-hearted spirit and a passion for hurt and discarded animals. She often volunteered at the local humane society and walked the dogs and played with the kittens. She found out she had female cancer back in May. The doctors performed an emergency hysterectomy, but the cancer had spread very quick, and by July, she was told she had a 20% chance of survival even after chemo and radiation treatment. She had one chemo session and ended up getting a spider bite on her leg which caused sepsis. It rapidly spread through her bloodstream and ultimately took her in a matter of a few short hours on August 28, 2022. This happened so suddenly, her family was unprepared for a memorial service, so it was postponed for 2 weeks. We hadn't been close for about 9 years, but there was a time when we were. Lexi grew up on the family farm that used to be owned by my grandparents. My uncle had purchased it and raised his 3 daughters there, keeping it in the family. It was a special place close to my heart, and I was so happy when I was invited to come stay there by my aunt and uncle. Lexi was in her senior year of high school at that time. I was almost 20 years older than her, but we still loved to hang out and goof around together. We would laugh till our stomachs hurt and generally have a blast doing whatever seemed to be amusing. When our aunt told me she was sick, I immediately said I wanted to go see her and see how she was doing. I am a caregiver, with nursing being my profession of many years, so I definitely wanted to see if I could be of any help. I had taken care of this same aunt when she had cancer, doing her wound care twice daily for several months. Unfortunately, because of the spider bite, I never got to see her before she was gone. This was very sad to me, and I had wished we had been closer during those years after she graduated, but that simply wasn't the case. Our family had all become estranged after the passing of our grandfather Kenneth back in 2008. Unfortunate how that happens a lot these days. When the patriarch is gone, everything falls apart within the family structure. 2 weeks after her passing, her parents and her boyfriend planned a memorial service for her at Lake Lacey State Park, where she used to go with her boyfriend, Matt, and walk their dog. She had a sheepdog cocker spaniel mix named Winston that she loved like he was her baby. I also have a Keyshawn named Uriel that my son gave me 3 years ago that I am just as fond of. He goes everywhere with me. When the memorial service was scheduled, I texted my uncle and asked if I could bring my dog along. He said sure, and that Lexi's dog would be there too, so it was not a problem. Fast forward to the evening of the service. It rained and was dreary and dark out all that day. Tears from heaven, they sometimes say on occasions like this. I was unfamiliar with the area or the park itself. My GPS on my phone went down less than 5 minutes from the park. I was very upset by this, as I had just driven 50 minutes to get to the area, and now I was lost. I cursed a blue streak as I drove in mindless circles around the downtown area. Luckily, I spotted a sign for the park. I started my way into it. The roads were really narrow and twisty. It was still daylight but so dark, and the rain was coming down pretty hard too. I was having difficulty finding the spot where the service was located. I was becoming increasingly more frustrated and a bit angry that I had came all this way and for nothing. I also was becoming upset thinking that the rain would prevent people from showing up, and it made me more sad for her because she was special, smart, loving, and sassy. Unique too, all the characteristics of a person that I gravitate towards. About that time, I started to pray to God and to Lexi to please help me find where you're at. Lo and behold, I rounded the next corner, and there everyone was in a cozy brick shelter on my right. With a sigh of relief and a thank you to the heavens, I arrived. There was a nice turnout. There were all sorts of people milling around and chatting. Me and Uriel made our way through the crowd to sign the book at a table with her pictures displayed. The book asked to state a fond memory of a time we had been together, so I put down the first one that came to mind. Her parents, my aunt and uncle, were busy receiving guests and condolences. I started to feel out of place and uncomfortable, being that I was there all by myself with my big fluff ball of a dog. He was thoroughly enjoying himself. He always gets lots of attention since he is a rare breed, and people can't quite figure out what kind of dog he actually is. He's also quite handsome too. I spotted our cousin Rick, so I went over and made small talk with him, since I hadn't seen him since his wedding some 26 years ago. We chatted and got caught up, and about that time the service started. You could tell that no one was prepared for her passing and really didn't know what she would have wanted. A former babysitter she hadn't been in contact with since she was around 9 or 10 spoke instead of a pastor. She may not have been all that religious, but we did have somewhat of an exposure to religion, as our grandmother would always make it a point to bring us to church with her. After this woman spoke, and it was difficult to hear her because there were several men in the background having a rather loud conversation, my aunt began to speak as my uncle stood next to her looking on. She broke down sobbing several times during this inaudible speech, stumbling over her words several times to the dismay of my uncle. I felt he was embarrassed by this, and it did seem that my aunt was definitely enjoying being the center of everyone's attention and sympathy. This annoyed me since Lexi had 2 older sisters, the oldest one being my aunt's favorite. Lexi was the one that was different. Not exactly the beauty queens the oldest 2 were. I knew deep down what my aunt really felt towards her, and that was resentment that she wasn't close to perfect like her older 2 sisters were, at least in her eyes. And on top of that, Lexi was meant to be a boy. After that display was over, it was time to line up for dinner. I got behind my cousin Rick, since he was the only one acknowledging my existence. My aunt had seen me earlier when I was signing the book, but had looked right through me as if she didn't recognize me. And my uncle was just preoccupied with everyone that had showed up despite the weather. We went through the line, gathered up some goodies, and sat down to eat. I chose to sit alone on the covered patio area while my dog wandered in and out of the tables looking for handouts. This is when I decided I was going to leave once I was finished eating. I still had the uncomfortable feeling of being there by myself, and although my aunt and uncle finally were able to break away from the crowd and say hello, I just felt like the odd man out. I left after finishing my food and began the drive home, and decided to call my mother to tell her about my aunt's behavior at the service. I have had a sixth sense about the spiritual realm since around 2017. When I am speaking the truth about something that the spirits can hear and agree with, I will break out in gooseflesh from head to toe. I proceeded to say, "Well, you know, Lexi was never her favorite daughter. Allison is." Immediately, my body broke out in gooseflesh, so I knew Lexi was listening, and agreed that this was the truth. I told my mother Lexi just agreed with me saying that. She has never believed I have these abilities, and has always labeled it as a form of mental illness or delusions. I was improperly medicated and misdiagnosed also because she doesn't believe I'm psychic, just believes me to be crazy. The medication caused me to lose all abilities to communicate with the deceased, and I should never have been put on such a strong drug in the first place based on being misunderstood. A week after her service, my dog began becoming really lethargic and would barely lift up his head. I was really concerned, and as soon as I had the funds, I took him to the vet. The night before I took him there, I had a breakdown of sorts. I was hysterical, crying and pleading with God not to take him away from me so soon. I wasn't ready to lose him yet. He was my best friend and only companion for the past 3 years, and I just wasn't ready to let him go. I was exhausted after this and laid down on my bed and began to listen to some hypnosis recordings to try and calm myself down. All of a sudden, I felt something reach out and touch the center of my chest with what felt like an electrical charge, almost as if my heart had been shocked with the paddles they use in the emergency room at the hospital. This happened 2 or 3 more times in rapid succession. It was the most exhilarating touch I had ever felt before. It was the touch of Jesus as he whispered to me, "Be calm, my child. You have suffered greatly. That is all over for you now. Allow me back into your heart as you once did as a child, and I will take your pain away and make it my own." This was all said telepathically, just like how he communicates with us when we get to the other side, like most people on your videos say. From that moment on, I have been more at ease and had a lot more peace with my life than I think I have ever been before. This is the best part of all. I am now free of the drug that was clouding my abilities and have been able to communicate with my family on the other side. My dad, my grandparents, and my middle son are all there and have greeted me. They are all quite busy with jobs they have been assigned with since crossing over, so we only get to communicate briefly. My greatest gift that Jesus has given me is that Lexi is now my spirit guide. I communicate telepathically with her mostly all day. She reminds me to do things when I forget about them. We talk about everything, especially about the boyfriend that she misses a lot, but is starting to discover that maybe he wasn't who she thought he was, and maybe he wasn't the one after all. She knows my past and all the wonderful and also the awful things that I have been through. She surprises me by bringing up minute details of my life that nobody else knows and that I never shared with her. She first came across and told me who she was, and I was skeptical, so she gave me the exact date and day of her passing. I immediately looked it up, and it was correct. I have kept all this a secret due to the fact I have had these abilities be misunderstood before, and I don't want to lose them again ever. I feel specially chosen to help others as Lexi gains more knowledge over there that I can share with others to bring them comfort that their loved ones are just behind the thinnest of veils and are watching over us all the time. I got the worst news at the vet's office the day after all this happened. My sweet boy Uriel has terminal kidney disease and has only 8 months to live. He hasn't been himself since Lexi's service, and I question if I have been selfish in my decision to keep him going rather than put him down. I just couldn't do it and have made the choice to keep him as comfortable as possible and allow him to pass away here at home with me rather than a smelly vet's office which he hates. I have since gotten his daughter that my son had, and she's a lot like him. So that's a comfort as well. Most recently, and because Matt, Lexi's boyfriend, said he was too much for him to deal with, I have acquired Winston, Lexi's baby, and most prized possession. She has thanked me repeatedly, and this is a way for her to feel like she's still with him until he crosses the rainbow bridge into her awaiting arms on the other side. Notes from Beyond Death. First, I want to thank Melissa for sending in her story. Now, I know this wasn't a near-death experience, however, it does deal with what awaits us on the other side, so I decided to use it for the channel. Until next time, stay blessed.